I'm Catherine Arndt, the Chief of the VLGA Connect Studio. Welcome to today's episode, brought to you by the VLGA, your counsellor support network and the national broadcaster on all things local government.
Hi everyone, it's great to have you back with us for TGU from VLGA Connect, sponsored by Hunt and Hunt Lawyers. This is the show, folks. This is the one that you've heard about, where we dissect the news from around the world of local government, not just in Victoria, but quite often beyond. And we get the thoughts of Julie Reid, who's with us. Hi, Julie.
Hi, Chris. Hi, Tony. Great to be back again this week.
Great to have you here.
Another range of topics for this week,
Yes.
which is
Just wait till you see what we have for you, folks. Yes. And Tony Rownick is here from Hunt and Hunt Lawyers. How's your week been, Tony?
Yeah, good, Chris. Really, really good. Trying to cram, getting everything done before I trot off on holidays. But yeah, it's been a nice week so far. But it's a highlight of my week joining you and Julie. It's hard to believe, I know, folks. But yeah, love it. Love this.
I can believe that. I can, absolutely.
Yes, so can I. But don't the weeks go around really quickly? It's like all of a sudden we're back together again. It's like
we're in denial, though, aren't we, Julie? Because Tony keeps hinting that he's not going to be here. I'm just ignoring it.
I know, me too. Yeah, we're not letting him go on holiday. There's no way.
There'll just come a week where he's not here, and this other guy named Nick, I think it is, who we're going to meet hopefully maybe next week briefly, might be getting set to fill the shoes of Tony, but more on that later. Anyway, we've digressed. Now, there's lots happening this week in the sector. Of course, the federal budget's been handed down. We'll look at some of the reaction to that. Some concerns out of Whitehorse about loss of open space with the big build that's happening. Disneyland could be coming to Werribee. Actually, can I just quash that straight away? Apparently, it was a short-lived rumour. It depends on who you ask, but we'll talk about that. Lots of other stuff too. That library book ban has been overturned. Where do we want to start, folks? Can we talk maybe briefly about the federal budget?
Yeah, let's talk about the budget.
Well, what do you want to say about the budget, Julie?
Well, actually, I thought it was interesting that Rural Councils Victoria, and there's different perspectives based on where you come from, but I just wanted to give a shout out to Rural Councils Victoria Chair Councillor Mary Ann Brown. They welcomed the federal government for a number of reasons. They were quite generally positive about it. They were positive about measures to reduce the cost of living pressures for the communities, which I think was really great. We've seen the federal government invest more in road infrastructure. There was a little bit of criticism by other groups about it being a bit more metro focused, but they are certainly happy to see an increase. And I believe the Roads to Recovery program will increase by $1 billion. And there'll be an increase of $200 million per year for the Safer Local Roads and Infrastructure program, which I was really pleased to see. So there'll be certainly some benefits for those small rural communities. I always like to see investment in rail, and there's been some really good announcements around the Gippsland rail line, $290 million, $150 million to upgrade the Maroona and Portland freight line. They have committed to more money in relation to housing, $1 billion, I believe, to build more homes. And so, that's obviously good news for RCV. And, they just want to make sure that Victoria gets a fair share of all of this. So obviously that's the message in all of this. The other interesting thing was, which I think we sometimes take for granted in the metro areas, is there's going to be a $40 million investment in Wi-Fi, which should help improve connectivity in more remote areas, particularly in an age where we're getting so digitally reliant, I suppose. So look, overall they welcomed those benefits back to local government and looking for a good proportion to come to Victoria. So that's from the Rural Council's perspective.
Yeah, that was one of the more positive responses. I noticed, talking about the digital connectivity over in Western Australia, they welcomed a funding program that would see some of those key arterial roads, those big long roads that are out in the middle of nowhere, to be better connected digitally. But the general theme, Tony, that certainly came from the major peak, Alga, and a few of the states, was that The federal assistance grants have not been returned to where they would like them to be. And I think, what was Elga's headline? Councils left out in the cold on budget night.
Yeah, a broken election promise. I mean, so the key, the financial assistance grants, of course, are these untied grants that go directly to local councils, and you can decide how you spend the money. It's not, it's not doesn't come with obligations in terms of how you spend it. That's been around for a long, long time, since the mid 1970s. At one stage, it was 1% of the I think the Commonwealth's revenue is the proportion. Yeah, one stage it was 1%. We're down to now 0.51, and the election promise or pre-election promise from Albanese was we'll get it up to 1. Well, what they've done, they've just followed the standard sort of legislated indexation formula this time around. So Linda Scott, who's the president of ALGA, Australian Local Government Association, has pointed that out as a disappointment. I think you mentioned WA. They're generally going to be happy with the budget, Chris. I think WA is getting, if you note, they're getting really well looked after in the federal budget. Probably a political anomaly there, but that's an issue. In terms of the money for housing that Julie pointed out, I think the key there is that local government would like to see a piece of that. At the moment, they're sort of locked out of that housing fund that's to supply 1.2 million new homes, similarly with the National Active Transport Fund. But as to pay credit, as Julie says, there was a commitment late last year to increase road funding to local government, and that's been met in that there's an extra, I think it's an extra 150 that's gone into that Roads to Recovery program. But regional cities Victoria have come out and made some comments. We might have heard about this additional funding to people studying or students studying for critical occupations.
Yeah.
And that at the moment, that's to cover, things like hospital and health services, aged care, early childhood, food production, those sorts of areas. What Shane Sarley, Councillor Shane Sarley, who's the RCV, Regional Cities Victoria president or chair, has said is that we'd love to see planning and engineering staff included in those critical occupations, because clearly there's a critical shortage there, particularly in the regional areas. And he says, I think rightly so, is if you want to deliver your commitments around this housing statement, we're going to need planners, we're going to need engineers, we're going to need building surveyors, project managers, those sorts of things. So they're sort of critical occupations we need to encourage. So I think probably better received than the state government in the sector, but but with some sort of caveats or concerns about perhaps we haven't seen what's been promised.
Yeah, and it's interesting, Chris. I like that critical workers focus by the regional cities. I think that was really good to jump in and emphasise the importance of trying to fill some of those gaps. There are programs going on, and there's a particular program going on in the UK where the central government are funding programs to increase the amounts of planners in the sector. So, same issues over there, but they are investing in these specialist programs to get more people through the pipeline of stepping into planning jobs. So I would love to see this, and I think it's really smart of them to raise this particular issue with the federal government, just to raise its profile of the importance of it.
Absolutely. Councils struggling everywhere to fill those roles, as they have been for quite some time. Now, there's lots more budget reaction around. A few individual councils have welcomed some funding for particular projects. Some of the other state peaks have put out statements. I've tried to put all those together into a bit of a summary, which you'll find on the Local Government News Roundup website or in the latest edition of the podcast, which came out this morning. But generally, as Julie and Tony have said, perhaps a slightly more positive response to the federal budget than we saw to the Victorian state budget a week or so ago. Now, the
Mm.
VLGA president, who is also the mayor of Whitehorse City Council, Denise Massoud, is in The Age today, taking a stand on a lack of planning for open space to go along with the big build that's happening. Tony, you picked this up out of The Age this morning. You must have been up bright and early checking your news feeds.
Absolutely. And understandably, I think concern at Whitehorse City Council being expressed by Denise Massoud there. So suburban rail loop impacts heavily on the Box Hill area, but so does North East Link. And in the reported comments, Denise Massoud says that suburban rail loop could leave Box Hill with a catastrophic lack of parkland. So council have formed, joined with a group of residents, a newly formed sort of residents group that's calling for this 7-hectare privately owned site, home to the heritage listed Box Hill Brickworks, to be transformed into a public park. Denise says that between Suburban Rail Loop and North East Link, Whitehorse stands to lose 15 MCGs worth of parkland or open space, and says, you know, you can't just take, you've got to give something back. And and with, I think there's about 30,000 residents in Box Hill currently. It's forecast to have 77,500 residents by 2056. So in the meantime, with all these capital works, which is to transport works to give a benefit across the metropolitan area. A lot of it focused around Box Hill. Box Hill Gardens is going to have 25% of the gardens taken up by suburban rail loop and inaccessible for the next decade while they build that, underground station precinct there. And understandably, I think Whitehorse are doing the right thing, agitating for their local community to see sufficient open space.
I would agree with that, Tony. I know the area really well. I worked for Whitehorse at one stage there, and I know the site that they're talking about. It's a significant site. There was actually a permit on that site for dwellings at one stage, and that permit has lapsed. But would be a significant contribution to open space in Box Hill. And we're seeing high density living happening in Box Hill, which is what we want to see, and that's obviously part of the government's plan, and that's really, really important, and it's really popular because it's been taken up. It's not as if these buildings are sitting empty. But I do agree that there's got to be this sort of trade-off. And, whilst the government is saying, well, they're meeting regularly with the councils to be able to talk to them about these things, the councils want to be heard. They want these kinds of contributions to be really seriously considered by the government in this space. There's an opportunity. If we get this wrong, if we miss this opportunity now, you're never going to be able to reverse it. So I can understand why there's a heightened anxiousness by the council and by the community groups. Let's hope that the government, Suburban Rail, comes to the table and talks seriously about what the potential options are. So we've got to get this one right. Suburban Rail is going to be fantastic. I'm sure it's going to benefit many, many people across Melbourne, but we have to not forget about those local communities and the impact that it's going to have on them.
So, and well done, Denise, for highlighting this. Now, I was just thinking, Tony and Julie, I had a look recently at where our viewers and listeners are coming from, and they're not all in Australia. There's quite a few overseas people tuning into this show, go figure. But I was just thinking, as Tony said, 15 MCGs worth of open space. Some people might not understand the reference to MCG. I think everyone in Australia knows the preeminent cricket and football ground in Melbourne. So I just did a little bit of homework. The MCG is about 20,000 square metres, right. 171 by 146 metres from fence to fence. 15 of those works out at 300,000 square metres. How's that?
Oh, you are just such a good researcher, Chris, I can tell you. And on the hop.
Where would we be without Google?
Where would we be without you?
No, without Google. All right, so a bit of context there for you. Now I'm picturing this. Mickey Mouse
Oh,
a big bucket of ice water being poured over Mickey Mouse. That's what's
oh,
happened this
oh,
week.
I'm so devastated, Chris. I'm like, I remember traveling to Paris and taking my son, well, actually Paris in one day to take my son to Disneyland, and it poured with rain, but it was still amazing. And so just to think that we were on the brink of getting Disneyland Werribee and it's all just been flushed down the toilet. I'm just like so gutted.
I don't know how to
Yeah.
break it to you, Julie, but it looks like this never was a thing. If
Oh
you
no, Chris.
if you ask Felicia Mariani, who's the chief of the Victorian Tourism Industry Council, she says this rumour's been going around for years,
Oh,
and it is just that, a rumour. But wouldn't it be great to have a
oh.
theme park in Victoria, whether it's Werribee or not? But for some reason, this has bubbled up this week. It's been picked up by the Herald Sun, even over in Perth. The Perth Now website has run this story. I know the local Wyndham TV ran the story as well. A Wyndham Council spokesperson has quashed this, saying no one's talking to us about a Disney theme park in Werribee. So basically, just cool your heels, folks. It's not happening anytime
Mm.
soon. So a non-story we've helped to turn into
Oh.
a story.
The
I
Tony,
bet
you're
you
thousands
the
taking ahead.
I bet you the
children.
residents were getting nervous about the traffic.
Yeah,
Yes.
thousands of children crying right at the moment when they hear those words.
Oh,
I haven't been to Disney, probably not likely to. But the funniest thing I thought, the only funny thing about this story was I saw some wag wrote, "Well, we already have Disneyland in Australia. It's called Parliament House, Canberra. So we don't need one."
Yes. I've been to Disney in Anaheim, which is the original and the best, of course. And I've
oh,
been to the one in Paris too, Julie. I didn't think
oh,
it was a patch on.
oh, really?
Right.
Yeah. Well, that's all I had the time to do one day. Blitz it. It was probably the wrong move, but yeah. Look, yeah, we can only hope for these kinds of things, but
I'm certain that
not.
Werribee Disney would be better than all of the others put together.
Oh, hands
No
down.
doubt.
Everybody would do an awesome job of
Mm.
delivering Disneyland.
The wild animals in the open range zoo, maybe jumping the fence or something.
I'm sensing you're ready to move. I'm sensing you're ready to move on, Tony. Next story in the list. Yeah.
Yeah.
This is how quickly things turn, folks. Mount Alexander
Oh,
Shire was being lauded last year for removing permit requirements to allow people to have caravan living, tiny homes on properties where an existing dwelling already existed. This week, they've copped some criticism through an ABC report, particularly for requiring a family to vacate their living arrangements. They're camping basically on a property where there isn't a dwelling. Tony, have you looked into the finer points of this one?
Yeah, I have, Chris, and so this relates to, as you say, the council bylaw prohibiting camping on land where there's no existing dwelling, and council have apparently given a notice to these landowners that they need to leave by today. I think that this is one of those wicked problems that this is a case study I'd give prospective councillor candidates or people who say, oh, it's easy to be a councillor, easy to make these decisions. These are really tough. This is a really tough decision. On the one hand, you've got, as Michael Annear, who's the Director of Infrastructure and Development at Mount Alex Shire, has said, there are serious constraints in relation to this land. It's within a designated bushfire zone. There's no formal access for emergency services. And yet, you've got the landowners who've apparently their lease ran out last year of a private rental. They couldn't afford to go anywhere else and rent. So they've understandably thought, well, why can't we camp on our land? They made an application for a permit to camp there without a dwelling, but that was rejected. I see this as one of those really difficult decisions that council have had to make. If you allow this camping to persist, yes, someone's housing need might be solved in the short term, medium term, but do you put lives at risk in the summer with bushfire, emergency access? Do you encourage other people to go and do this and create a problem? So real difficulty there in Campbell's Creek, just basically on the very outskirts of Castlemaine. Tough decision for council officers and no doubt councillors involved.
But isn't it just too easy for people to say when they don't like something or don't want to actually understand the intricacies of the decision to say, this is a case of bureaucracy gone mad?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
I
yeah.
agree. It's one of those ones where if you think this is straightforward, you're not understanding the nuances and the competing,
Mm,
your genuine issues here that are
yeah,
both human on both sides,
yeah.
yeah.
And councillors would have said, that they really struggle in this space because, it's a very emotional topic. We're talking about a mum with, a couple of young children and a dog, you know, that's
Yeah.
on the front page of the ABC,
Mm.
and so it tugs on those heartstrings. It's a very emotional issue. Nobody wants to make anybody homeless. And the council have talked about how they might be able to provide some support to try and find, some kind of alternative housing option. And this is where, it's hard when councils don't have control over housing like they do in the UK, where they can't,
Yeah.
assist the person, but at least they can advocate and try and work with agencies to see whether there's any alternative options. And I'm sure that they would be doing that.
Yeah.
As we speak. So, yeah, very emotional issue, very hard issue for a council to decide upon. Mm.
Good analysis, Tony and Julie. Thank you for that. The story we talked about last week, which has been everywhere in the media, even globally, Cumberland City Council in Sydney and their library book ban. This was in relation to a same-sex parenting book in their Western Sydney libraries. That book ban has been overturned. Now, I did follow, I've got nothing much else to do. I did follow this live on, what was it, Wednesday night? When they had 200 or so protesters outside the council chamber in Maryland. The police closed off the street to traffic. At one point later in the evening, the police apparently outnumbered the protesters because some of them went home. There were 17 people registered to speak on the book ban. I think my sense was most of them were in support of it being overturned. There was some pretty fiery debate in the chamber. A number of people got ejected. And ultimately, the book ban has been overturned. They're going to move the book to a different part of the library. Common sense outcome, Tony?
Yeah, I do think so. I think it's the right outcome. I think it wasn't an experience that sort of left either side sort of covered in glory in terms of, as you point out, the quality of the debate. That I gather some councillors received death threats. There were councillors trading insults. The mayor, Lisa Lake, had to eject people from the gallery. It was quite rowdy, I gather, and there were multiple attempts to move, different amendments to this motion to have the book placed in different parts of the library, accessible to different age levels. Ultimately, I think, in a 12, I think it was a 12-2 decision with one councillor not being present. So clear, very strong majority ultimately in favour of overturning this ban. I think a number of councillors might have changed their mind during the debate, but it's probably good to sort of close the door on this debate. But I just don't think that it was, the strong views that were put, understandably. It's quite fine for people to put their views, but the notion of, people having a screaming match and, make it difficult to conduct a meeting,
Yes.
problematic to me.
Yeah, and it's interesting, Chris, because I believe it was a 4-hour debate on this one issue. So,
Well, the meeting started at 6:30, and I think the
yeah,
ultimate decision was just after 11. They had to extend
wow.
the meeting, so
Yeah,
it was more
yeah.
than 4 hours. Yeah.
And this is where, when councils are dealing with these hot issues, this is where, you question about, good governance and how that's going to affect their meetings going forward, etc. Let's hope it all just goes away and then things calm down and they can continue to have good governance in their council meetings. But 4 hours debate on one issue, which was ignited by someone bringing something forward, which where they didn't have all the facts potentially. I don't know, but seems to be to me to be pretty poor governance. So let's hope they bounce back from this.
I think you can safely say they didn't have all the facts because it was admitted they hadn't even read the
Yeah,
book. So how
that's
could
right.
you have all the facts to
Mm.
support your argument? But yeah, that time of debate included, I think, the 17 speakers, who
Yeah.
included Craig Kelly, the former MP, was one of those people who rocked up to
Right.
speak about it at the meeting. Couple of themes though that came through from it. One was, and Steve Christo made these comments after the meeting, that councillors had been pressured or given into pressure from the media to change their position. I'm sure those councillors would probably put it a little bit differently. They sat through 4 hours of debate, as Julie points out, so perhaps their minds were swayed by the weight of the argument. Who knows? But the other thing is there were some accusations, which I'm sure have got some truth to them, that a lot of this is about council elections being 3 or so months away in New South Wales. They're in September. I think some councillors even said quite clearly in their comments to the council that, people, when they vote in a few months, should remember who stood where on this issue, because it might help them decide who they want to be on the council going forward. So, inherently political as well.
Yeah. I think the other thing that changed from the original vote, or what occurred in between the original vote and the vote that overturned this decision to ban, was I think the federal government have made some statements about potentially withholding funding for the library.
The state government, actually. So the New South Wales Arts Minister.
Yeah.
I did read the letter. They tabled the letter that he sent the council. He was urging them to revisit that resolution with haste, were his words, but basically said that the resolution is ultra vires because it contravenes guidelines that are issued under the library legislation in the state. So it was, effectively illegal. So, they've overturned that for whatever reason, or perhaps for all of those reasons that we've talked about. This one, I raised an eyebrow or two. I've got two eyebrows. Yeah. At this one, Tony, and I was interested particularly to hear what your thoughts were. The Mayor of Hobart, the Lord Mayor of Hobart, Anna Reynolds, has done quite an extraordinary media trip this past week, criticising a decision of her council. She obviously voted a different way to the way it went. But the thing that caught my eye is that she's been saying, I'm not speaking out on this as the mayor, I'm speaking out as an individual councillor. Is this another variation on the you can't take your councillor hat off? And maybe,
I think so too. I mean, I don't think you can sort of figuratively, as you say, discard your mayoral robes and say, now I'm taking as an individual, and then sort of put them back on again and be mayoral. I think there's a weight and responsibility to that position where sometimes you've just got to say, look, that's how the vote went. It was a 5-4 vote, folks, so a very close vote in relation to a planning decision. It was a decision to reject an application for a St Vincent de Paul apartment building for vulnerable women at risk of homelessness. So for them to be housed there, the council officers had recommended, or the council planners had recommended in favour of the application. However, lots of objections, I think 43 objections, lots of amenity concerns, and the building proposal does exceed council's own sort of height limit policy for the site. So understandably controversial arguments either side, but to your point, Chris, I just don't think it really washes when you say, I'm speaking as the mayor now, but now I'm going to speak as an individual, and then I'm going to put my mayoral hat on. I think you kind of there's benefits and authority that come with the mayoral position, and there's sometimes, I think there's elements where you've got to sort of say, well, now I'm the mayor, I've got to suck. One thing I've got to stop doing is perhaps being a bit more individualist in my public statements, because, I'm seen as the spokesperson for this group of councillors, disparate as they are.
And then to rub salt into the wound, she says, I hope they appeal the decision.
Yeah.
Which I haven't heard. They probably will. Julie, whether or not you agree with the decision or not, there's an obligation, isn't there, as the mayor, to stand by the ultimate position of the council?
Yeah, absolutely. That's the message that would have been, the key messages that would have been given to the mayor for the media would have been given by the
Yeah.
communications department. These are the
Mm.
messages you need to deliver in a situation like this. So don't know how this was able to happen. I suppose she just took it on herself to
Yeah.
to try and separate herself, but I'm sure there would have been key messages that would have been given to her to say you need to back the council's decision,
Yeah.
as the organisation would have to do as well. The organisation has to take on that role and back the decision of the council. So do councillors. So interesting. I mean, it's an interesting. I can kind of. I can kind of sympathise a little bit with her position on it, though, in the sense of, when you're looking at it from a planning perspective, but I'm not going to get involved in that debate. But I can understand, and again, this is another one of those really emotive kind of issues where you're talking about vulnerable women over the age of 50 that need housing, and so. Oh,
Yeah, we're not even arguing that particular point. That's
no.
a side issue. The only reason
Yeah,
I
that's
put this one
right.
on the list was this principle of the mayor,
Yeah.
the principal spokesperson of the council, actually speaking out against the decision the council's made. Perhaps we're seeing a shift because it's not the first time we've talked about this principle being under attack, and free speech sort of coming to the fore a little bit more. Perhaps, I don't know, perhaps we're becoming dinosaurs.
I don't
in that
know. Does it link
respect.
back to human rights, Chris? I don't
Yeah,
know. There's
I don't
something
know.
to human rights about being able
Open
to
for
have free
discussion.
speech. I
Yeah,
don't
yeah,
know.
interesting one. The state government down there has used this decision to basically say this is why planning decisions of these types need to be depoliticised and taken out of the hands of councils, and they've got some legislation coming to put some panels in place. Some of the stuff that we've seen in New South Wales and talked about in Victoria as part of Operation Sandon. So another one to keep an eye on there from a planning sense, Julie.
Yes, certainly will. Thanks, Chris.
All right, a few other stories of interest this week that we might just mention in passing. There were a handful of councils that sought special rate variations in New South Wales. IPART there, the Independent Planning and I'm not even going to bother trying to remember what that stands for now.
Pricing
Right.
and regulation.
Pricing and Regulatory Tribunal.
There you go. Do you feel more whole for having got that? Never mind. IPART has said some of them can have their rate variation in full, some in part. One was rejected. Snowy Valleys was looking for a significant increase over a couple of years. Some pretty eye-watering numbers here in terms of percentages, Tony and Julie, like 30, 40% over 2 or 3 years in some cases.
I think what it says to me is Victorian councils, you've got to ask, got to have a go if you got any chance. And I don't know how many Victorian councils have asked this time around to go above the rate cap. But as you say, 9 councils put their hands up. 5 were approved, and 3 were approved at a lower uplift than they'd sought, but certainly were an uplift above, the core rate peg, I think they call it there. So, generally success was met. I know there's a lot more councils in New South Wales, so 9's not particularly representative of the council cohort there. But, yep, you got to be in it.
Yeah, that's right. What I was interested in is the amounts, because we're talking about for 24, 25, the ones that were approved is somewhere between 10% and 25% increase. So you're right, Chris and Tony, that it's a significant uplift in comparison to when you think about, we've been getting 2.5, 3.5 as a base, rate cap. This is significantly above what the councils would have experienced here. So yeah, I think you're right. I think it's worthwhile giving it a go. There's obviously huge hoops to jump, and these councils no doubt went through that. But it would be interesting to learn from their secrets of success in this space. So I think it'd be good for councils just to be aware of which councils they are. And reach out and learn a little bit from what they were able to do in terms of convincing the government.
Yeah, and there's a bit you can glean from the information that IPART has
Mm.
published. For example, I think it was Griffith were partly approved, and they've explained the reasons why some of what they were asking for wasn't granted. It was related to a specific project
Mhm.
that they'd said they needed to fund, etc. Should also be noted that the rate pegging environment in New South Wales has been in for a longer period of time than we've had
Yeah.
rate capping in Victoria. So perhaps this is a bit of a crystal ball sight of where we might be at some point down the track in
Mm.
Victoria. Couple
Yeah.
of executive notes of interest to the Victorian audience, but from Queensland, where the council CEO exodus has continued since the elections. We're up to 7 now by my count, council CEOs to depart or announce their departure since the elections. The latest is Margot Stork at North Burnett. Now, Margot, of course, well known in Victoria, former CEO at Macedon Rangers Shire, and was also at Murray River Council across the border at one point. Margot has stepped down effective immediately. Not a lot of detail there about what's led to that, but of course, as I pointed out, it's only a few weeks since the election of the new council. And Rachel Brophy, who I think was Rachel Cooper, probably people would remember her when she was a director at Wyndham. She has resigned this week from Douglas Shire Council and is taking some time out. So we just want to send our thoughts and best wishes to both Margot and Rachel for whatever comes next for them. It's a pretty tough
Mm.
environment, I think, to be a CEO in local government generally, but in Queensland particularly at the moment.
Yeah, and look, we welcome them thinking about coming back and increasing the gender diversity at CEO level in Victoria. So,
Yeah.
if you're interested, watch out.
On that, Julie, it was I didn't realise until I looked into it a bit closely this week. I've done an interview for the roundup that's coming up in the
Yeah.
next week or two with Ruth McGowan and Kerry Wilson about the gender equity situation, both
Yes.
as we head to the election from an elected representative point of view, but also the council CEO position in Victoria. We were up to about 33 female CEOs in Victoria. We've dipped under 30. It's at about 27
Okay.
or 28.
That's
By the
right.
current count. So it's going in the wrong direction.
Yeah, it is. It is. We're really concerned about it, and I had some dialogue with Ruth about that recently, just to confirm the numbers. But it's something that that Ruth and her sort of team around her of women that are really driving this are doing a great job in trying to make sure that balance occurs both at that CEO and at the councillor level. Obviously, Ruth, there's not much that Ruth can do the CEO level potentially, but certainly from an elected representative level, then there's some really good work going on there. And I know that in the past that she's had discussions with local government Victoria around the challenges in this space of getting that diversity at that councillor level.
Lots of work being done in that
Yep.
space. So look out for that episode of the Roundup coming soon. I think probably in another week or so. Got a lot of content to get out to you in the next few weeks. Couple of cases that are coming up that are of interest that were announced this week. And one we might not get to know too much about. Tony, in New South Wales, ICAC is looking into a former employee and contractor at Canterbury Bankstown. They've just announced a public inquiry there, so we'll know a lot more about that in the weeks to come. But a multi-million-dollar fraud investigation has been confirmed at Gold Coast City Council. We're talking $2.78 million, I believe. The CEO there has confirmed this issue and reassured people that systems haven't been compromised. But other than that, they're playing their cards pretty close to their chest.
Yeah. So no real detail. You say Tim Baker, the CEO, is confirmed under investigation by police forces up there in Queensland, and it doesn't seem like it was a cyber fraud type breach of the operating system. No personal data is being compromised, but certainly a substantial amount of money as serious fraud having been detected. So I guess we'll watch that one, and there'll be one would assume there'll be a court case that will follow, and someone will face some charges.
And some learnings, no doubt, because every council CEO and finance director hears this and shudders to think, well, what's happened? How's it happened? We need to know, just in case there's something we all need to learn from going forward. That's true, isn't it, Julie?
Yes. certainly is.
Sorry,
Very.
I just thought you were nodding off there, and I just needed to give you a little.
Oh, no. I'm getting ready for the next exciting.
I knew that. The next story, I know you can't
list.
wait. I know you can't wait for the next story.
Please let me talk about that one.
Put on the list. Okay, let's jump to that now because we're getting towards the end of the list, folks. I just had another thought, but it's gone, so it'll come back to me. There's a man in England. As soon as we say England, Julie perks up. There's a man in England who's been going around his local community cleaning the road signs. They've apparently got very dirty with road grime. He's taken out a bucket of soapy water and they look fabulous. The council said, stop that. It's unsafe. Do you think that's the right way to deal with this initiative, Julie?
No. This is what I would do. So look, this man, he's Corey Poynton, and he's 27. Okay, he's 27, and he's going around. He's cleaning up road street signs. So particularly your 40 miles an hour
speed limit signs and give way or whatever they're called over there. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and he's actually got 3,500 people following him on Facebook, and they think he's a real hero.
Yeah.
Because he's going around and he's actually creating a safer road environment. So this guy's doing good. Like he's doing this in his spare time. Now I don't know whether he's got a job, but this is at Warwickshire County Council. They've told him that he could be in danger. Now, I agree with that. I agree that he could be in danger. Jumping up on a ladder on the side of a road and cleaning road signs is not a really, unless you're being trained in safety around that. It's not there's a risk. Okay. So they're covering themselves by making sure that this risk is addressed. But you know what? I would be referring him on to the cleansing contractor or the road contractor that needs to maintain these signs. And I would be, getting him a job there, or I'd be offering him a job and training him up and getting him to run this service, or at least be part of this service in some way, shape, or form. I'd be talking to him about what his drivers are around this particular need. Get him in the cleansing team, in the council. This guy, he's 27. And he's doing good in the community. So they're the kinds of people that we want to work for council.
Well, I thought the same, Julie. Surely there's a more positive way of dealing with this. But what does the lawyer in the room think?
Well, I would say, Corey, if you're watching, and we've got a global audience, Chris says, if you're watching, Corey, the council don't really want you to stop washing the signs. They're just writing you that email to cover their butt, mate. You get out there and you keep cleaning those signs and you keep being a hero, and everyone will be happy.
There we go.
There's the practical. That's such good legal advice.
That's the practical solution. I can't believe I didn't think of that. That's why we've got Tony here. All right, Tony. I hear that Hunt and Hunt lawyers had a bit of spare sponsorship cash.
Oh, yeah, all 25 cents. But no, we did. We have got behind a great event. It's the St Kilda Film Festival celebrates its 40th anniversary this year. Australia's longest running and most prestigious short film festival, folks. Australian and international short films running from tomorrow, the 18th of May, through the 27th of May, various venues across St Kilda, but also you can tune in online. It's got some accreditation with this Academy of Motion Picture Arts, and if you know that phrase, because that's from the Oscars, so it's accredited through that academy, so that the winners of awards here, the best short film, the best documentary, are eligible for Oscars consideration. I'm hoping I get the invite to the Oscars. But look, go along, check it out. About 100 short films, drama, comedy, animation, documentary, experimental genres. City of Port Phillip is obviously a really strong supporter of this event that they've had at St Kilda since 1985. And yeah, Hunt and Hunt are glad to just jump on board as one of the sponsors. I think they've given us a particular category award to look after, and we're the best animation award. Yeah, check it out, St Kilda Film Festival
Oh, that's
That
awesome.
Best Animation Award, that must be some sort of a nod to your TGU experience.
Yeah, they saw that Christmas special that JLF put together.
That's
and
what I was thinking.
Yeah.
Mm.
If
That's
if
what I
not,
was
you
thinking.
should have been given the comedy one. But I would
Harsh,
agree.
Julie, harsh.
I would agree.
You should
I
put
would
a
agree. Mate,
TGU
it's a great
episode
event.
in.
It's a great event.
Well, now, there's a thought. TGU perhaps could get nominated for Best Foreign.
Best local government podcast.
Yes, for the Oscars, I'm thinking, Tony. So that's how you might get your invitation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh,
Yeah.
geez.
I think this one's jumped the shark.
I think it has.
Yeah. Nothing more on the list. All right. That's all we have for you today from TGU. Julie, thank you. Have a great week.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Chris. I'm heading up to Bendigo for the weekend. So
Nice.
it's such a beautiful part of the world. So I'm looking forward to taking some time out and in the busy schedule.
Very nice. And Tony, we've got one more with you. Yeah,
That's
I
right.
have been listening. I have
One
been
more.
listening. I know.
I've got my phone. You know, you have the weather of where you're going. So I'm flying into 38 degrees Marrakesh. So that'll be
Marrakesh.
Ooh.
Yes.
Wow. Okay. So we're going to get some travelogue contributions.
Yeah. Only the exotic locations for me, and I will be sending you little reports back. And I'm doing an interview of one of the mayors. In fact, in my in a 3,000-year-old town. And I'll be presenting him with a very Australian gift, and I'm hoping that we get to get a bit on footage of the Sharon football outside the Roman temple getting kicked around. But yeah, that'll be fun. Watch out for that one, folks.
Oh,
Excellent.
that sounds brilliant, Tony.
All right. So Tony off on travels very soon, but we've got you one more time before that happens. All right, that's TGU for another week, folks. It's in the can. It's on YouTube. It's in your podcast queue. Thank you for watching and listening, and thank you to Hunt and Hunt Lawyers as always for sponsoring TGU from VLGA Connect. We'll see you next time. Bye for now.